Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So these guys are yet another relatively new addition to the Aussie beer scene, although they are a little bit older than the other Aussie breweries we've reviewed in recent videos, but they have built a very good reputation for themselves over the last few years. They do a wide variety of different styles, and the beer that we're going to have a look at today is quite a highly rated one. It's a style that I know very well, a very popular style at the moment, so I think this will be a very nice place to start with when it comes to these guys. And for me, it's just cool to be able to review some Aussie beers for you on the channel again. It's been a very long time before this lot that I came across here in Osaka in Japan. So yeah, needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to the state of Victoria, which when I was in Australia was one of the two big states when it comes to craft beer. Western Australia was where it kicked off, and Victoria was kind of following not long behind that. But we're going to go to Melbourne, and to be specific, we are going out to the east to Glen, and that means that we're going to have a look at our first beer from Brewing. Now, this particular beer is called Sitting on a Hill. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a double IPA. Now, I'm not sure whether this is going to be a New England hazy double IPA or exactly what kind it's going to be. Will it just be an American? I think it's definitely not a West Coast. But yeah, we'll need to see about this one a little bit when we taste it. But this is yet another beer that I picked up at craft beer based Mother Tree in Umeda here in Osaka in Japan. They seem to have a good amount of different Australian beers, and that's where I've been getting all these Aussie beers that you've seen me review in recent videos. So yeah, I'll definitely be going there again when I come back to Japan, and hopefully we can look at some Aussie stuff. But they've got a great selection of Aussie, Canadian, New Zealand and American beers actually. So yeah, when it comes to reviewing some foreign stuff, I think that is where I'm going to go as time goes on. But yeah, definitely cool to introduce another Australian brewery to you here on the channel, and cool to go back to Victoria, where I was staying for quite a wee while when I was down there. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what this beer is all about. Massive shout out as well in this video to Sam Smalley, who's an Aussie avid follower of a number of European beer tubers. I know that he's been enjoying seeing some Aussie reviews here on the channel for the first time in ages. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Brewing. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go to the homepage, go up to the search bar, put your home state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If I review beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you will find a number of different countries in there as well. This one will be found in the Australian playlist along with a number of other things, and we will hopefully add to that a little bit more as time goes on. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Deeds Brewing for the first time. So as I've mentioned to you already, Deeds Brewing are based in Glen in eastern Melbourne in Victoria, in the southeastern part of Australia, and the company was founded back in 2012. But the two main men behind the company are Patrick Alle and David Milstein, who both studied engineering together at the University of Melbourne. But in 2003, the pair founded their own distribution company called Red Island, which imports a number of beer and spirits brands into Australia. I think these guys got pretty big because they had the recorder league rights, and they distributed all across Australia from what I understand. But in 2012 they went on to establish their own beer brand called Quiet Deeds, and they gypsy brewed under this name for a number of years, and they only had a couple of beers. I think it was like a pale ale, a Kolsch, and a few other things if I remember the article correctly. But in 2015 they secured a premises which was formerly a car workshop on Parran Place, very close to the Glen train station, and they purchased their brewing equipment the following year. But they started submitting papers for the permits in 2016, but they had many issues, and it wasn't actually until January of 2018 that they received permission to actually start building the brewery. But they had originally planned to have a tap room at the same time, but it ended up that they had to kind of separate the applications. So they were helped quite a lot by a local petition, and then in April of 2020 they were finally given approval to build an on-site tap room and kitchen, and this is where they now have 28 taps, and this opened to the public in April of 2021. But in the brewery they have a 2,500 litre brewcut, or 25 hectolitres, however you want to describe it. This is from DME, who, if I remember rightly, are from Canada, and the first head brewer that they had was Justin Corbett, who had previously worked for Hawkers and studied at Heriot-Watt in Edinburgh. But in 2022 he was replaced by Richard Hollingworth, who previously worked for Lion's Malt and Shovel Brewery, brewing the James Squire beers, which are quite popular in Australia, and then he worked for Asahi at their brewery in Melbourne as well. But he's been an international brewing association, our IDP, Master Brewer, IDB I should say, Institute of Distilling and Brewing Master Brewer for 15 years apparently, so very good pedigree behind them, I have to say. But these days Patrick runs the sales and marketing side of things, whereas David runs the finance and operations side of the company, and more recently they've been working to distribute their beers across Australia, as well as beginning a few exports, and they've been brewing a number of mixed fermentation sours in recent times as well, from what I can gather. Some of them look very interesting, so hopefully a few of those make it up to Japan at some point soon, or hopefully I can go down to Melbourne again and have a wee look at how the beer scene's been evolving. Keep your fingers crossed for that. That's something that's definitely in my mind. But as of April 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced about 250 kinds of different beers, according to Untappd, and that number will no doubt increase as time goes on. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Deeds Brewing for the moment. These guys were a brewery that I hadn't heard of when I was back in Australia. They would have been in their very early stages, I guess, when I was there in 2015. But yeah, definitely cool to see more and more things popping up across Australia. I would love to go back down there to visit my uncle and also have a look at some of the different beer places. But yeah, if you want to learn more about Deeds Brewing, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on and have a wee look at this beer itself. So this one is a 440 milliliter can, so a little bit less than a US pint. An imperial pint, of course, is 560. I'm not sure in Australia if I think they know, I know they use the imperial measurements, but they have like schooners and all these kind of things as well, which I'm not overly familiar with how many milliliters that is. But yeah, this one, 440 milliliter can. I think this beer cost me 1,400 Japanese yen, so that's going to translate to roughly maybe about 11 euros. About £10 sterling in that case, and about $12 American, something like that, if the exchange rates are, if my memory for exchange rates is serving me correctly. So yeah, a wee bit more expensive, but you know, Australian beer is a little bit expensive. You've also got the fact that it's imported into Japan as well, where craft beer is expensive in itself. So yeah, you're going to pay a wee bit more to drink craft beer in Japan, but that's just how it goes. It's not too much more than the Swedish prices that I'm used to though. But yeah, plain silver top on the can there, nicely presented, sitting on a hill as we said, 8% ABV, double IPA. It tells you a little bit about the hops on the side here, but I'll just let you have a wee look at the Deeds Brewery symbol first, which you can see on the top of the can there. You get a nice little closer look at the can, and it also says this as well, basically independent, established 2012, but I don't think the camera's really zooming in on that very well. Can't wait to get my own phone back with the 4K, but yeah, we'll make do with this for the moment. But yeah, it tells you that the hops on this one. So just to list the hops, there are Simcoe, Equinaut, Mosaic, Idaho 7 and Azacca in this one, all 5 of which are American. There's various different things in here. So the Simcoe is regular pellets, cryo and CO2 extract. The Equinaut is in there, pellets and cryo. Mosaic, pellets, cryo, incognito. There's Idaho 7, which I'm guessing is just pellets, Chinook pellets, incognito, and then there's Azacca cryo in this one as well. So various different things, but yeah, your hops are Simcoe, Equinaut, Mosaic, Idaho 7 and Azacca, all of which we've come across before. Simcoe, about 12% alpha acid, it's going to give you a lovely kind of soft passion fruit. You know, Equinaut's about 13 or 14%, it's going to give you more of a limey character. Mosaic, 14% alpha acid, quite a distinctive little earthy note to it, but mainly tangerine oranges. Idaho 7 is going to give you a lot of kind of softer, juicy fruit like apricots, papayas, pineapple, things like that. Also a good little bit of juicy mango, about 14% alpha acid there, and Azaka is a kind of mandarin-y orange with a bit of pineapple in it as well, 14% alpha acid once again. But that's a quick rundown of the hops. Let's get this beer out into the glass and actually have a look at this thing. So an 8% double IPA from Deeds Brewing, Glen Iris in Melbourne in Victoria in Australia. Let's do this. Yeah, been very impressed with the beers that I've had from Australia this time, though. It's, as I say, been very cool to try a few things, and we've been able to cover a good few of the Aussie states in this one. We haven't really had anything from South Australia or WA, unfortunately, or Tasmania. But yeah, to be able to do a few things from Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales has been very nice, I have to say. But yeah, anyway, we've got this beer out now into the glass and we can have a proper look at it. So yeah, as you can see, this beer is poured with about a finger, just under a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. If I bring that up to the camera, you can see it's got some kind of medium sized bubbles to it, but yeah, not overly foamy, I have to say. We have to be aware that this beer might well not be in its freshest condition. We can turn this off now as well. If it will go, there we are, just gives us a bit of light. But yeah, we have to be aware with these Aussie beers that they're probably not in their most fresh condition, but they have been pretty good so far, I have to say. But yeah, you can see the bubbles in this one are a little bit more kind of medium-sized rather than being full and foamy, and usually that's an indicator that the beer is a couple of months old, something like that. But yeah, anyway, with this beer, other than that, you can see, I'm not sure whether this is going to be a New England hazy or if it will be more of an American IPA. Now remember, the American IPA term is, it usually refers to a beer that's a little bit between the West Coast and the New England. So we just need to see with this one, but it certainly looks a little bit more like a New England. So lovely kind of rich yellow colour. I think it's appearing a little bit brighter to you guys on the camera than it actually is to the naked eye. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put in will affect it too. But you don't often have to care about that when it comes to IPAs. So yeah, this one for me looks pretty much as you would expect from a modern IPA. It has got a good little bit of haze to it. I would guess that there's probably a bit of wheat and oat in this one, which isn't untypical for American IPAs, and it's kind of part of the character of New England's. But yeah, it looks the part of this one. The level of haziness in New England IPAs, of course, is down to the oat content, wheat content, and to degree what yeast you use as well. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation in this one. The head has just faded away to be a thin foamy layer as well. But yeah, nice kind of creamy coloured head on this one, I have to say. But I don't think we need to say anything else about the appearance of this beer. We can have a wee look at the aroma and just see what it's going to have in store for us. Yeah. So I'm going to say straight away, you can smell a little bit that this beer is not going to be in its freshest prime condition, but as long as it's good, that's the main thing I want to introduce Aussie breweries to here on the channel. But yeah, one of the ways to tell with kind of more New England hazy type IPAs, if you get more dryness out of the oats and the flavour and aroma, that's usually an indicator that the beer has been sitting a little bit. If the oats are more kind of creamy, then yeah, it means your beer is a little bit more fresh. But yeah, I do like how this how it goes together in this one. For me, the first impression of this beer is that it's got a good little bit of barley malt to it. There's a little bit of oaty character in there, potentially a little bit of wheat, but I think it's more a kind of barley malt leaning IPA, this one. So as I said, for me, there's if this is going to be a New England, there are 6 elements to think about. The kind of farmhousey, yeasty characters, the rye leaning, grainy sort of things. Those are a bit more prominent in American brewed New Englands, right enough. But then you've got barley malt bread, oaty creaminess, wheaty bitiness, and then the kind of sweeter side of things as well. So yeah, when it comes to this beer, for me it really is more kind of barley malt. You've got a nice kind of smooth green component to this one, some nice juicy fruits in there as well. Yeah, the aroma of this one I think is quite nice actually. It gets a thumbs up from me, but let's break it down and just describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So for me, yeah, the backbone of this beer, it absolutely has a little bit of that kind of fresh, white bready bread crust. That's the backbone. There's a wee bit of a kind of woody character to it as well. You've got some Jacob's cream crackery notes in there. Those are the three things for me that are forming the backbone of this beer. But beyond that, there's a little bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of this one. So yeah, definitely a wee touch of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready note to it. It's got a little bit of a, it's got quite a little bit of fluffy white bread as well. I would definitely say that about this one. So yeah, wee bit of bread crust, a little bit of kind of woody and crackery note, white bread crust for sure. Then yeah, wholemeal bread, white bread, and in the back of the nose I do get a little touch of wheaty bitiness, but not overly much. I don't think there's too much wheat in this beer. Either that or the wheat variety they're using is really smoothing out the beer rather than anything else. But on the oaty side of things, you do get a little bit more kind of dryness out of this. So I'd be curious to know exactly when this beer was canned. But yeah. But yeah, you can get a little bit of dryness out of the oats in this one. It does have a little bit of creaminess, but for me, yeah, the oaty character in this beer is a little bit drier. We'll see though, sometimes these beers can be a little bit deceptive, and I've been impressed with how well these beers have held up actually from Australia, if you do consider that they are probably a few months old. Some of them have held up very, very well. The Range Brewing one was great actually. But yeah, for me, you do get a little bit of oaty dryness out of this one. You can smell that there's a wee touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy note to it, maybe a little bit of biscuit as well. But yeah, definitely a wee bit of oaty, kind of dry character coming out of this beer. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's have a wee look at the green component of this one. So yeah, for me, the green component is, it's got a wee touch of earthiness to it from the mosaic, but overall, it's actually very grassy, this one, I think. There's a little bit of floral character in there, but again, it's quite smooth. But for me, it's actually quite a wet and slightly oily, grassy character that comes out of this beer, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I do like how that, how all of that pieces together in this particular beer. But you can tell with this beer it's using mainly late addition and dry hopping. Now when it comes to IPAs, you have three kinds of hopping. Assuming that you have a 90-minute wort boil, of course, you can have early addition hopping, which will take place within the first hour of the wort boil. That will give you mainly bitterness. When it comes to the flavour, it's simple chemistry, more heat for more time, it extracts more chemicals. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil gives you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then after the wort boil is complete, you have dry hopping, which gives you pretty much all flavour. So yeah, for these IPAs, West Coast IPAs tend to use all three, and that means you get a deeper and more dank sort of aroma and flavour to the beer. But then New England IPAs and more modern IPAs use more late addition and dry hopping, which gives you a brighter green component. And you can kind of smell with this one that it's got more late addition and dry hopping, to be honest. So that's definitely kind of standing out in this one. It's quite grassy and wet in its green component. But on the fruity side of things, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of orangey character in this one for me, which will be the Azaka and the Mosaic for sure. So I'm getting quite a bit of a bright mandarin-y orange out of this one. Good little bit of oily pineapple as well. And yeah, the way the beer goes together in that sense, I think, is really, really nice. So yeah, I get a good little bit of lime from the Equinaut. I have to say I've not had Equinaut in quite some time, if memory serves me correctly, because Motueka has kind of taken over from Equinaut in Europe, at least when it comes to the more limey hops. I haven't had Equinaut in a long time. But yeah, I do get a little bit of that kind of limey character, and it's a bit more of a zesty lime actually. I think Motueka is a little bit more oily in its character. But yeah, good little bit of mandarin, good little bit of zesty orange, good bit of lime, quite a bit of pineapple, but then you've also got a few other things going on in this beer as well. You've got a little bit of the kind of juicy passion fruit from the Simcoe, quite a little bit of juicy mango as well from the Idaho 7 and a wee bit of apricot. But I find this beer, for me, it's more orangey, tangerine and kind of limey rather than anything else. I do think that the more citrusy, zesty fruits lead on this one, and the tropical fruits take a little bit of a kind of back seat, to be honest with you. So yeah, interesting aroma, this one. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in, but I think we should try this one now and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Sitting on a Hill, an 8% double IPA from Deeds Brewing in Glen in Melbourne in Victoria in Australia. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty nice actually. Now I think I can get the impression this beer, this is about 3 or 4 months old, I think, something like that. But it's still in pretty good condition actually, I have to say. And it comes across as more of an American double IPA than it does a straight up New England. I think that's also fair to say with this one. It's not quite creamy enough to be a New England for me. I think this, and it's got a bit of sweetness to it, that like you would expect from a West Coast IPA. So I think, yeah, probably this one has to be termed like just an American double IPA rather than being New England or outright West Coasty. It certainly, you could tell from the appearance this one wasn't going to be West Coast, but yeah, we talked a bit about New England IPAs earlier. But it's certainly another very solid Aussie double IPA, so I'm not complaining. Yeah, for me, first impression, this one's a quite big floral character to it, lovely oily fruity notes, good little bit of a kind of bready backbone to it too, which I certainly enjoy. So yeah, gives you everything you would want. Another very solid drinking experience for sure. But yeah, let's try and break this beer down a wee bit and just describe it for you that wee bit more in depth. Middle third of your palate then. You can feel the backbone of the beer. It's got a lovely kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody character coming out of it. You can certainly feel that there's a little bit of an almost Jacob's cream cracker type quality in that middle third of your palate too. But then above that, you have a more kind of wholemeal, brown bready type character, which is quite interesting. The other thing I would point out about this beer is that the more I wasn't picking up so much wheat in the aroma of this one, but the more and more that I drink of this beer, the more wheat I get out of it actually. But at the same time, it does get a little bit more juicy actually, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, like I say, you've got a little bit of a wholemeal brown bready layer, you've got a layer of a more fluffy white bread in there, and then you definitely have a more, how would we say, you've definitely got a little bit more of a kind of wheaty character on top of that. So the wheat actually kind of densifies out the beer, and you can feel it's got a little bit of dryness and zip to it, which is kind of interesting. And then above that, you can feel down the middle line of your palate in this beer, there is just a little touch of oaty character. I think that this beer, when I drink it, it feels a lot less oaty and a lot more barley malt and wheaty compared to what I thought it was going to be in the aroma. But yeah, down the middle line of your palate, you can feel there's a little touch of creamy oat there, and as you move out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more. You certainly get a wee touch more kind of dryness from the oats, and it gives you almost a little bit of sweetness. This beer gets sweeter the further into the aftertaste you go, but in the dead centre of your palate you can feel there's a little circle there where you get the kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy notes coming out of the beer. Yeah, so for me, yeah, the kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy notes just linger there, but yeah, a little bit more biscuity character as you move out toward the edges of that middle third of your palate. And yeah, I think that covers everything we really need to say about the middle third of your palate with this beer. So let's go to the back third of the palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there. It's kind of brown bready, but at the same time, good little bit of white bready character to it. The base of that back third of your palate has a bit more, it certainly has a wee bit more kind of graininess within the kind of bread crust backbone. And as I've always said, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, the sweeter and smoother flavours come out a bit further forward. So yeah, the bread crusty backbone is a little bit more grainy. There's a wee bit of a, kind of Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing in there as well. Above that, you've got a touch of a more wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing as well, and you can feel that that layer is a little bit taller and more airy compared to the middle third of your palate. Then the white bready layer sits above that, so lovely big airy bready notes in there, and above everything else you have the you certainly have the more how would we say, you've got a little bit more of a kind of yeasty farmhousey type character to this beer as well, so you can feel that above the back third of your palate there. You can feel the wheaty bitiness in there for sure as well above the white bread, but then yeah, you've got this more yeasty farmhousey note there, so more of a farmhousey, airy, honeycomb and woody type white bread, and that kind of lingers into the aftertaste too. I find this beer has a wee bit more graininess the further into the aftertaste you go, so for me that's certainly quite interesting. But again, this beer gets a big thumbs up from me. Another very solid IPA, this one, but quite a bit different from the other Aussie ones we've had recently, because this is more like a straight up like American double IPA rather than being a straight, you know, like a New England hazy sort of affair. It's got a wee bit more sweetness to it for sure, and a bit more bitterness to it as well. So on that note, we should go on to the green component. So yeah, for me, the green component of this beer, in the back corners of the palate, you've got a good little bit of earthiness there, which I think is most likely to come from mosaic in this beer. But as you move further forward, it gets quite floral quite quickly, this one, and actually you've got a good little bit of floral spicy character on the front corners of your palate. So there probably has been a little bit of early edition hopping in this one, and you do get a more kind of, the spicy character just lingers in this one the further into the aftertaste that you go. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's a wee bit lighter and more grassy, and yeah, the lighter kind of grassy notes you get out of this one. It has got a bit more of an oily character to it as well, the more that you drink of this beer too. So yeah, I really like how this one, I do really like how this beer goes together actually. The green component just gives you that wee bit more bitterness, and it kind of builds in with the more kind of wheaty bitey character that the beer has actually. Yeah, it goes together it just, everything fits in this one quite nicely. But yeah, lovely little bit of grassy zestiness around the front curve of the tongue, and a wee bit more bitterness the further you go into the aftertaste. Let's have a wee look at the kind of the front third of your palate. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a more bready build up in there. You can feel it's a kind of white bready character, and you feel a little bit of the wheat too, but the base of that front third of your palate, a little bit of a more bread crusty note, wee bit more kind of bread crusty, a wee bit more kind of brown bread, and a little bit of the wheaty zippiness there too. But then above that, you've got the nice kind of oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's kind of look at what fruity notes we're getting out of this one. We'll put the rest of the beer into the glass as well. That was a wee bit of an aggressive pour. That wasn't really meant, but yeah, now you can see we've got a nice foamy head on the thing. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the fruity side of the beer to round off the flavour part of the video. Yeah, so at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice kind of, I do get a little touch of a kind of grapefruity note out of this one, but that's kind of quite minimal, and I get the feeling just from the kind of flavours you're getting out of this one, you can feel that that's maybe a little bit because some of the hops are starting to drop out of the beer. But yeah, there's a wee touch of grapefruit, but then as you move further forward, you get the big kind of passion fruity notes from the Simcoe. It's quite an oily passion fruit actually, and Simcoe does that though. Simcoe in the more West Coast IPAs shows you a bit more oily character, but in the New Englands it tends to be a bit kind of softer. So yeah, there is a wee bit of that more oily passion fruity note in this one, probably because of the slightly sweeter malt base. But as you move forward, you get a nice big juicy mangoey character from the Idaho 7 most likely. And then in the very middle of the palate, you can feel underneath it's got a little bit of apricot-y note, but then above that it's a more oily kind of pineapple. But moving forward from that, you get more kind of orangey character both from the Azaka and the Mosaic in this one. It's quite a bright and zesty orangey mandarin-y character, but then behind that, or just behind the very front tip of the tongue, you get that quite pungent and zesty limey character from the Equinox. So all the hops are really showing themselves out in this one, and I think the zesty lime and orange lingers into the aftertaste a bit more. The tropical fruits you're going to get earlier in the flavour, so when you first take the beer in, you're going to get more of that kind of tropical fruity character out of this one, but yeah, later a more zesty kind of orangey note. So yeah. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer really is quite nice. I think for me that's the highlight of this one, the balance between the citrusy zest and the more tropical flavours that this beer has. But yeah, I think stylistically it's best to describe this one as an American IPA rather than being New England or West Coast. It leans a bit more toward the New England side of things for me, but more of a West Coasty bitterness actually. So yeah, interesting beer this one, but very solid, and it does make me want to try a few more things from Deeds Brewing, and it's nice to see how the Aussie beer scene is progressing, of course. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour. Let's round off this review with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel of this one. So for me, this beer is kind of pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. There's a wee bit of oiliness to it, but also a wee touch of sweetness as well. And yeah, you know, just light, smooth carbonation. In terms of the bitterness in this beer, I think this is 50 or maybe it could be 60 IBUs. This one, I get quite a lot of floral character in this one. It does get a little bit more floral and bitter the further into the aftertaste you go. In the malt base, you've got a wee bit of graininess in there. You've got a wee bit of smoothness and a little bit of sweetness in there too. So a bit of everything going on. You've got a lovely mix of tropical fruits and more kind of zesty things too. Yeah, I think this is a very, very nice American IPA, this one, but a bit more bitter than some of the other ones I've come across in recent times, I have to say. So yeah, a very solid introduction to Deeds Brewing in Glen Iris in Melbourne. I think we'll need to go and visit these guys when I do make it back to Australia, hopefully in the not too distant future. Yeah, this was Sitting on a Hill, an 8% double IPA. A little bit. Yeah, this is definitely right in the border region, this one. It's right in the middle, actually, between New England and West Coast, because it's got a more New Englandy base to it, but a wee bit of West Coast sweetness and a bit more West Coast bitterness as well. But a very solid beer, this one, and it certainly makes me want to try a few more things from these guys for sure. So I think we should leave it at that for this review. Yeah, Sitting on a Hill, an 8% double IPA from Deeds Brewing in Glen Iris in eastern Melbourne in Victoria in Australia. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Deeds Brewing. Do give me some other Aussie brewery recommendations for things that I should check out, and like I say, hopefully I'll get back down to Australia at some point fairly soon. But until then, Slàinte, Scott, cheers, check out my social media, check out Deeds Brewing social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review.